All right. Hello, welcome to some Derps Talk About Games. I'm your co-host, Mango.
And I am your co-host, Buddy.
And today we're going to talk a little bit about Free Guy. But before we do that, Buddy, why don't you tell the folks at home what it is we do on this podcast?
Well, it's pretty simple. On this podcast, we like to talk about games, and we also have been talking a lot about movies recently and TV shows and stuff. And there's a movie that came out that is all about games. It's about game development, it's about how games work, I guess, kind of. It tries. And so
It's
we're going to talk about it. That movie, by the way, is Free Guy, starring Ryan Reynolds, directed by Sean Levy.
yeah, and also has the guy from Steve from Stranger Things as
It
one of
also has Steve from Stranger Things. That's very true.
um and a guy who looked like he was or a character because I can't say guy in this context. A character who looked like he was definitely supposed to be Kevin Hart but was not Kevin Hart. Which is like the
Who was
secret.
weirdly named Buddy, which I
Yes,
didn't
right. I
get
forgot
at
about that.
first. He kept saying like, "Hey, Buddy" or whatever, and I just thought it was like a whatever. And then I saw his name tag, and I was like, "Oh shit!"
Yeah, because they're yeah. All right. Well, before we get into spoilers, buddy, what did you think of this movie?
I think Free Guy is ultimately pretty forgettable, and I don't recommend it. Is that mean this is a very perfect, like, you're bored on a Saturday and you look through the Netflix queue or whatever, and you're just like, I just want to watch something lighthearted and fun and uninteresting, just like something to put on in the background while I want to veg out. Free Guy is a great movie for that because it's pretty dumb as rocks. It's pretty stupid, and it's also like incredibly forgettable. So that's like the highest heights that Free Guy is ever going to get, which is probably not that high and probably not a very rousing recommendation. But there we go.
Yeah, I'm gonna recommend it a little bit less than that. I mean, so part of this is so there was recently this XKCD, that's like, it's about it's like two geologists talking to each other, and it says silica chemistry is second nature to us geochemists, so it's easy to forget the average person probably only knows the formulas for olivine and one or two feldspars, and quartz, of course. And it's like even when they're trying to compensate for it, experts in anything wildly overestimate the average person's familiarity with their field. I think this applies well to this movie. And
Oh
so,
my god, absolutely.
but
Oh my god,
I
absolutely.
also think it's a little bit better, worse than that, right? Because I think if you have, like, maybe I'm overestimating this because you working with video games as like a community manager, and I'm a programmer, and like this was so mind-bogglingly terrible to me. But I think even if you have like a passing familiarity with video games, like as a concept, you're just like, I don't know. The other
Oh,
conspiracy.
I have a different take than that, which is interesting. But we can talk about it in the spoiler section. But I have a very different take than that for sure.
The other comparison that comes to mind is like nerds hate Big Bang Theory, but like normies like Big Bang Theory, right? Like maybe if you're like a normie that like thinks about like watches their kid play Minecraft, this is what you think video games are like. But like I don't know, it was way too much for me, and that's the like that is uh the thesis or the kind of basis of my anti recommendation. Um, if like I was like silently fuming at this movie like nearly the whole time, but I don't want to give too much away. Um, uh,
I don't know. I found it more funny than anything. This must be like, there's a I don't know. There's the way these like cop movies go or something, or like if I'm an FBI agent and I watch a TV show that's about like the FBI, I feel like there's a good-natured way to take that, and that's kind of what I think this ends up with. Does that make sense?
it does, it does. Um, the other comparison I wanted to draw is if any of you are old enough to remember Full Sail and Full Sail's TV commercials that were like two guys playing like a video game and be like, we need to tighten up the graphics on level 2, and then they like move the controller around a bit, right? Like that's what this whole movie felt like to me, right? Like
That
90 minutes of that.
I get that one for real though, actually.
I'll see if I can find like an old like YouTube clip of it and link it in the description. But with that, I think we're gonna move into the spoiler section of this.
Sure.
If you for whatever reason feel compelled to watch the movie and care about spoilers, it's a very predictable. So that's the other thing too. before we get into the spoilers, like it's a very rote movie, right? Like if you like see like the if you see the trailer, you know exactly how this movie resolves, like
Yep.
within like 85 to 90% accuracy. So feel free to listen to the spoilers anyway, but here's a spoiler warning for it if you care. Let's go. All right. So
So where do we want? I have a lot to say about this movie. Weirdly enough, for a movie that I think is bad and uninteresting, right? There's a lot going on here, and I'm sort of interested in kind of like digging in. Where do you want to start?
okay, let's since we talked about it in the pre-spoilers, let's talk about the suspension of disbelief stuff.
Okay, yeah. So the underlying principle here, and we've talked about this before, is this idea that like your suspension of disbelief is challenged, right? When it gets like challenged and broken, you lose entirely, right?
Yeah.
There's a certain amount that it'll bend, and you can kind of accept it, and you're with it, you're alongside the movie or whatever. But if it breaks, then all of a sudden you go back and you say all of this dumb bullshit is dumb, right?
And
That's kind of like the underlying principle.
yes, and the break happened very early for me in this movie, but like just to give you an example, towards the end of the movie, um uh the Taiki Watiti, the who's the CEO of Not Blizzard, which I thought was actually a really cleverly done parody, right? Tsunami and like the text is all right. It like felt like it was supposed to be Blizzard, right?
I really felt that. It is incredibly timely, to be
Yeah.
honest.
But he walks to the bottom floor, which is where the server room is, and like servers on premises are not a thing, right? That's the
Yep.
thing I
Nope.
like. And then like he
0% chance.
walks into it, and there's a fire axe in the server room, which is like also not a thing, right? And like he proceeds to start hitting the servers, right? And those are things that like to me like screamed at me as like this is not real, but like also things that like if my suspension of disbelief hadn't been broken, I would have been able to forgive. Like that's the example I want to give is like a thing that like screamed out to me, but like I ultimately could have ignored if the other things didn't push
Yeah,
past
okay.
me.
So there's also a bit in the movie. I feel that way about this other bit. There's a bit in the beginning of the movie where Guy, the AI NPC, breaks free, right? Where he breaks free and he is chased down by two developers, Keys and Mouse or whatever. And in game, they chase him around, they shoot him with guns, they activate God mode, which lets them rebuild this thing into a staircase to chase Guy up a building. And I think that stuff. So first of all, if this were to be a live game, there would be commands at the disposal of the you know the developer doing this that just say kill, like I just kill this guy, right? It's like slash kill T or whatever, and it's a developer only command, and they just target a thing and they kill it. What I mean? There is no world in which you wouldn't have easy access commands like that. You would also have commands that are like slash teleport or whatever, right?
Right,
Like
like
to
God mode
to
would be
move.
turn off clipping and like just like let you move arbitrarily. And
Yep.
I think that's a good example though of a thing that like ultimately I'd be willing to forgive that for the spectacle of the movie, right? Like I
Yeah,
remember sitting
exactly,
there
right?
going,
You can't just do that because that would be lame and boring,
"You're
right?
right,
Obviously that is unfun if they just kind of let it happen
right."
um in the way that like things work out. So I don't think that that's a real criticism. My big criticism along this line though is the portrayal of specifically Antoine and Tsunami or whatever, which is like so the thing that you mentioned was how this is like not a like it doesn't come from anywhere. I think this is like this is a gamer like fever dream. This is like or like a wet dream. Antoine is sort of the parody of game developers that players who play games like League or like WoW or like I don't know, Call of Duty, right? Like they think the developers act this way, right? That they purposefully make the game bad because all they care about is money, you know what I mean, or whatever. And I think it's like Reddit, like it is like the
Yeah,
Reddit version of game developers is represented in this guy, which I thought was
you
just
know what? You're
I don't
absolutely
know.
right because like there's a moment in the middle of the movie where the main good guy character or whatever is like, why don't we just make an original game? And Taiki is like, because sequels make money, and money's the
Yeah.
only thing that matters. Right?
Like
It's like,
IP, all I care about is IP, and he goes on this whole rant about IP or whatever. And I must feel, like I feel like what is there like a job that just gets absolutely reviled in the movies? Like I don't know. If you're
it's
I
like
can't think of a good
businessman, right?
example.
It's like generic.
Yeah, but like yeah, the idea that just all of these people are horrendously focused on like the bottom line, and they know that they're shipping a bad product. They knew, like that's the kind of shit that like that
Or like
if you are if you are like a gamer, you think about the games that you play, right?
or like
And
the
that you
idea that like that Antoine is like actively disdainful in this way, right? Like the idea
Yep.
that like honestly that Antoine is like having this conversation with like a community. Like how many times did you talk to Yoshi people? You were a Square Enix buddy. How many times did he come to you and ask you about your
Yeah, personally, actually, it was like, "Hey, buddy, what do you think about this?" Right? You know what I mean? Like, come on. Oh my god. Yeah, and and the thing is that like I have met a lot of these guys, like I don't want to say a lot of these guys. I know a lot of people in game development, obviously, at this point. And I have never in my life met a game developer who is like the money guy. You know what I mean? Who is like
like
this, like obviously a business exists to make money, but I think the real bottom line nugget of truth is that games are developed for people that are more than just you. Like let me just evangelize to the audience for a second, okay? If there's something in a game you don't like, most of the time it is not there for you. It's there for a person who enjoys it. You know what I mean? Like WoW is an easy example just because like I know WoW. People complain about like the Maw assaults or whatever, or like Korthia dailies, right? And then they say like, "Oh, I can't believe why is Blizzard putting this shitty daily grind in the game or whatever." But the thing is, I know people who that's the game to them, right? They aren't interested in raids. They're not interested in Mythic Plus. They don't do any of that stuff. The thing that they want to do is go out into the world and do this world content. They want to, help the Covenant guys beat up the Maw. They want to, and they want to get items from that. They want to get powerful stuff from that, right? They want to go and do these dailies. In order to increase their rep, in order to get mounts, in order to do a million different things, right? And so there's this sort of myopic nature of gaming where people, because they don't interface with a particular system that well, they kind of have a little bit of friction with it. They get just so mad and they're just like, how could this possibly have happened? You know? Also, Lou in the chat says those frustrating money people exist, but they're not the devs. They're the CFO and the rest of the leadership team. Gamers and their misdirected rage are fun. That's fair enough. Honestly, I mean, I'm sure that there are plenty of CFOs and business managers or whatever out there that are predatory douchebags, right? Just because what's like the asshole rule, right? Like you take a certain amount of anything, and there are bound to be a bunch of assholes in there, right?
yeah. Uh,
Yeah,
I mean, and there's also like the other kind of like like CEOs select for psychopathic traits or sociopathic traits, so like that they're overrepresented in that. I mean, but
yeah.
I think to just be a little bit fair, like they're focused on the bottom line, but I think most of what they do is less big. Like it's not like they want to make worse games, right? Like they're just doing
Yep.
like it's not.
Nobody ever ships a game where they are like, I purposefully made a bad game because I know it's gonna make money. You
Right.
know, most of the time, but like good games have fall to sort of like bad intent, like like things just don't work out sometimes, right? You think the game is ready, but it's not, right? You have an idea for how players are going to interact with a certain subset of systems, and they don't interact with those systems in that way, right? There's a lot of that stuff, but I've never met anybody in the industry who walks into work every day with a like, I don't know, just an approach that they're going to cut out that they're going to focus only on money and they're going to cut stuff all the time, right, in order to make that work. I've just never met anybody who is not like trying to do the best they can in the confines of the wider system of game development.
Yeah, so Nick in the chat or Ragnarok mentions I feel like Fallout 76 is a counterpoint, and I think this is going to lead to like what I think is like the kind of like realer version of this, which is there is at some point a disconnect between management and devs, and like the devs don't want to be like this is a total pile of shit, right? Like that we've been working on for 3 years. It's like somebody says it needs to ship at some point, and it's like, well, I guess this is going, and like that disconnect kind of like just prevents things from happening, right? Like we'll salvage
Yeah, I
what we
mean,
can out of it.
I've seen this. I gave a talk about this when it comes to indie games. We've shipped products that have bugs and stuff in them, and the core reason that that happens is because you just it's like no game, no, it's like no battle plan survives first contact with the enemy. Like no game survives first contact with thousands of players, right? Like this kind of famously happened with Spinch for us, where we released Spinch and all of a sudden people were reporting all of these issues. And it turns out that, like, we had our QA guy and he was doing QA, right? And on his system, Spinch was running just fine. But on a myriad of different systems with a myriad of different specifications, it wasn't working correctly. And so like that stuff is always sort of hard to control for, or really hard to boil down. So, you know, that's the world we live in. Lou says, I've met execs who don't care about play games, but I don't have a big enough sample size to determine if that's the rule or not. The number one thing I know, at least for me in my experience, is very rarely do people play the games that they work on. Most of the time, people play other related games, but you don't shit where you eat, basically.
Yeah, and I also believe that there are plenty of execs out there who don't play or care about games, but
That's true. That's also true.
they care about it insofar as like you need a good product in order to make right? Like a bad
Yeah, I mean
product will.
the new, because so for anybody who doesn't know, the Blizzard CEO, after all this stuff with the lawsuit, he got axed, and they gave it to another guy who's like an Xbox alum, Mike Ibarras.
Yeah,
He has been actually tweeting about and playing a bunch of WoW on stream. Like he's been streaming playing WoW, which people seem to enjoy, I guess, because they think, I don't know.
I mean
I don't
so
think
like
he's making decisions about World of Warcraft development, but whatever, right? Like the idea that he's playing the game that he manages is an admirable thing.
yeah, so I like when that announcement came out, I looked at him and was like, that's a fucking suit, right? Like that's like a businessman. I think he's just trying to like prove some of his bona fides, right? Like like I'm
I
a
mean,
gamer.
frankly, he's a better gamer than me, man. He's clearing plus 20s, right?
Mm.
And I can't clear that, right? He's playing the same class as me too. He's playing Fury Warrior. But I mean, I definitely know some people. I know some people, for instance, on the Warcraft team who are all Warcraft player, like who play WoW. But most of the people I have met in game development just don't play the games that they, if I'm working on whatever. This is true for me in Final Fantasy 14, right? Like I maybe like 10 years from now, maybe 5 years from now, I'll be able to sort of get past it, but I can't look at that game and not think work.
That's fair.
So, I've
Yeah,
just never played 14.
yeah, uh,
Anyway, that's a very big
yeah.
divergence from Free Guy. Really, the point is that I think Antoine is this caricature of like the evil video game executive. I also think that it's bigger than that, right? Like I also think that it's viewed as like the evil like movie executive, the evil TV, like the focus on IPs, the focus on name recognition, all of that stuff felt to me like the way people complain about there are no original movies anymore. It's only IP, it's
Yeah.
only franchises or whatever. Which I understand that criticism, certainly. People never turn out for original movies, unfortunately, except it's like John Wick, I guess. Um,
And you know what's really fucking funny is like the end of this movie has like a bunch of callbacks to like the MCU, which is like
oh my god, that was I was honestly maybe on board for the movie up until that point. I was like, there was a joke that I thought was very real, which is they introduced Dude. So they introduced this big hulking version of the free guy, right? And he's called Dude, but he has a bunch of placeholder like dialogue where he says like catchphrase, and then there's another one where it's like he just said he has a list of 3 things, and like the second thing is TBD, and the third
Uh,
thing is third thing here, and
yeah.
I laughed really hard at that because that is a very real joke to me. Like a lot of the file for like trailers that I'll work on are like poo poo pp one dash copy. You know what I mean? Just like because you do this kind of temple shit all the time, right?
Oh man.
And I thought that was really funny. And then immediately after that, there was this thing about him pulling out the Captain America shield, and I was just so mad. I was
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
angry.
Yeah. No. And they played the fucking Avengers music, and then they had Chris Evans
And
cameo. I
then they
was
had
like,
the Chris Evans cameo, and
oh.
then they did the Star Wars thing with the lightsaber, and the lightsaber didn't even cut his fucking
Yeah. No. And like I would have been like, I would have not minded as much, except that like, not only did they pull out a lightsaber, but they had like 4 characters be like, yeah, that's a fucking lightsaber, right? Like it's like,
yeah, it made that was the moment that broke me. That was the moment that really broke me. I probably would have been in here saying nicer things about, for instance, like there's Jacksepticeye shows up, Pokimane shows up, a bunch of like Ninja
so
shows up.
you can tell that Ninja was the big get because they actually like did some shots of him, right? Whereas everybody else was just like mailed in their fucking stream footage, right? Like,
Yeah, I know, right? Oh my god. And like that stuff didn't bother me at the time, but after this MCU shit, I was just like that's the kind of thing that I'm like this is horse shit. I hate it. I
yeah.
hate it so much. Really though, I think so on a real kind of critical level, the thing that is bad about Free Guy is it's very screenwriting 101. I think that's the core problem. I actually think that a lot of the cinematography, the editing is fine. The acting is whatever. I kind of like don't love this for Ryan Reynolds. I think he's pretty bad in the part, but I also think that he really loves this movie and wanted to make this movie, and I could tell that like I could tell that he wanted it. I just don't think that he's super well suited for it. Um and the and like the editing was really good. That was the thing that I was really surprised. I was like, wow, like this is actually a pretty well put together, film on terms of like lighting was bad. This is something that happens with a lot of TV directors. Sean Levy is famous. He's like the Stranger Things guy. Um and so I think it's just too bright. There's too much light everywhere. There's no shadows. Which is something that you do when you're lighting for TV, but I don't like it in movies. I think it looks bad. But otherwise, there's like a lot of neat shit in here that I would be like, "Oh wow." Like, they do stuff with focus where, when they're doing this romance stuff, the background is always out of focus, which kind of brings first of all, it brings those characters more into the fore, and it also creates sort of like a visual motif of when the two main characters are doing romance shit, their romance shit has this visual effect. That stuff is neat and nice and fine, right? But at the end of the day, you're producing a script, and the script here is just very screenwriting 101. It's I need to get the thing. Oh, I'm gonna run away from the thing. There's a big fun and games montage in the middle. I was actually kind of hoping that it would be more of a time loop movie because there's aspects of that in there, but they don't do any of the fun time loop shit.
Yeah, yeah.
So I don't know.
Yeah,
That's my overall take is that this is a bad script.
I would agree with that. There's also some like weird, like I think technically the editing is good. I would agree with you on that, but like the like similar sequencing is like weird and bad. Like there are a couple times that similar things that's happened, but the one that sticks out the most in my mind is like our female lead is like sitting at a computer, and something happens that she needs to leave the computer, and then she's like walking down the street and gets a call from Steve from
And then she
Strange
walks back to her house. I remember that.
that
I remember that happening. What?
yeah,
Why?
yeah.
Where were you going?
Exactly, and something like that happens a couple different times. And then to my very earlier point about like if you're a game, there's like some things just like didn't make sense from like a very video game perspective, right? Like, it's like they're like you're the NPC, you don't fight back. I'm like, what kind of game is this? Where you just rob a bank with zero effort? Is that like
Yep.
a thing, right? Like this is like just like not how games work, right? Like or like the idea that like this dude who found this very rare clip has it hidden in his house instead of like it being like the most viewed thing on YouTube, right?
Yep.
Like, you know,
Though I
although
will say that whole bit with him, this is another thing that endeared me to the movie, is its excellent and expert use of Channing Tatum, who is a modern miracle of acting. I am more and more convinced every day. But Channing Tatum as that guy and cutting between him and his like dweeby real world avatar was super funny and really good. And I love Channing Tatum. And this is such a great part for Channing Tatum to just kind of like, I don't know, ooze all over. Oh God, that bit was really good. Even if yes, I
yeah.
agree that the overall plot mechanics are pretty stupid.
Although I will say something that like seemed Rang is really funny to me is like the the plot device where like their game is like stapled in like off in gray space outside of the world. Like that's actually like really real. Like that feels like that. There's like a real thing I've seen places, right? Like just like stuff stapled into the background that like kind of like it like because you see that in video games, right? Like you go
Yeah,
past the set.
yeah. I was thinking about it, like the famous example I can think of is WoW bunnies, right? Where most WoW designers when they're doing stuff, right? Like if you see like a thing play out in the world, there's usually an invisible bunny under it that is like the thing marking it in the world, because bunny is like the top of the critters list or whatever. So you just make the thing target the bunny or spawn on the bunny or whatever, and then make the bunny invisible. And it's like that kind of that stuff honestly
Yeah,
is all over games. Any game I've ever worked on or any game I have ever, kind of like seen the back end for is full of shit like that. Mostly because it's just, like honestly, it's just sort of an efficiency, like time saver thing. For people who play WoW in the chat, by the way, anima orbs are like this, and you can actually see it. So when you pop an anima orb in Torghast and that has that effect, right? That effect goes to the ground, and if you look at the ground from a certain angle, you can actually see the outline of the bunny that is the thing is holding the anima orb in place.
that's amazing. No, but like yes,
Yeah, I mean, the whole build being in the game is a little weird and awkward because it's like, what the file size of that would be ridiculous, right?
so
But
you're right, but like like I have like we copied this piece of code here because we don't actually know how it works, and like it just kind of we just kind of leave it alone, and we just like take
yeah,
the outputs and inputs. That feels very real to me. Like
hmm
yeah, that's probably big, but like it was a small indie game, maybe not, right? Like like we couldn't figure out how to actually extract their AI system, so we just kind of like pulled it out. I mean that whole kind of like licensing thing there was a little bit wonky, and like the other like like while he's smashing up the servers, right? It's like yeah, it's not gonna be like he's it's
oh,
not
like
like
he's deleting the thing in
yeah, it's not
motion or whatever. Part of my frustration is that a game like this obviously is going to have dozens of servers, so like it that it doesn't matter. You know what I
yeah,
mean? Like
yeah. For
that was
latency
one of the
purposes, they're not all gonna be in the tsunami headquarters, right?
yeah,
Like
that was exactly my thought. I was like, how the fuck is this the most popular game in the world and everyone is playing on a single phase of, Free City or whatever?
right, and it's not like and the beach isn't gonna be on one server and the other thing's gonna be on another server, right? Like it's gonna be like all sharded and like but like that is classic
That
kind
is,
of
that is like technical nitpicky bullshit.
yeah, yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah,
I don't think that's fair at all.
yeah.
Yeah, so I want to go back a little bit to my Ryan Reynolds thing because I want to dwell on this point. I think Ryan Reynolds is not great for this part, and here's why. The core function of Guy is that he's a fundamentally sincere, like upstanding dude. He is noble. He is a nice guy, and the comedy is that he is this naive. He just doesn't understand the wider world, right? Um, the frustration I have with that is that Ryan Reynolds' whole persona is Deadpool at this point.
Yeah.
He's so winking and so sarcastic that I cannot take him dead seriously anymore, which is part of this like fundamental failing in the script, right? If this was Chris Evans, right, who just spent the better half of this playing Captain America, or like Henry Cavill, right, playing Superman, who are these characters who are believably and earnest. They are believably earnest and sincere, right? This would work a lot better. And I want to relate this back to a very important moment in the film franchise, uh, the Fast and Furious, which is in Fast 8, The Fate of the Furious, F8, if you will. Um, you have Vin Diesel on one side, who, as I've said before, is taking this shit so seriously. Like he thinks he is gonna win an Oscar, right? Patrick Willems said that when when Vin Diesel is talking about family, he thinks he's doing Shakespeare, right? And then you have The Rock on the other side, who is winking at the camera. He's charismatic, he's fun loving. Things aren't never going to be too serious. He's gonna be this living cartoon or whatever. Those things have tension. It's the exact same tension. Ryan Reynolds is The Rock, and Guy is Vin Diesel, and the disconnect there creates so much friction that I had a really hard time with this.
Yeah, for whatever reason that didn't bother me as much, but I definitely see where you're coming from, right? That like he like to me, like the fact that he is kind of winking at the camera kind of works, just because like that's like what this movie is, right? Like that's the whole point of it. So it doesn't bother me as much, but I definitely see where you're coming from there.
Yeah.
And I understand it.
Honestly, everybody else did it. I mean, I didn't love Buddy, right? Like the Kevin Hart guy, obviously. But I really enjoyed both Millie and Keys. This guy who plays Steven is great. He's great in Stranger Things, which we know because he's kind of like, you know, in Stranger Things, he plays that archetype, but like he kind of evolves into a cool guy even after being like the shitty bully archetype or whatever. And then in seasons 2 and 3, he kind of really comes into his own and is a more like fully fledged kind of character. And I think that like this guy is just a really solid character actor who did a really solid job, right? Um, I think the character of Antoine is sort of, like I said, he's kind of this like almost like propagandistic figure, this like straw man version of evil, game executives or whatever. But he's fun in the part, and he
Yeah.
he goes, he's hammy and that's fun. Even the guy like Mouse or whatever, the Keys' partner, who is also sort of like a developer. He also read very like real to me, right? Like he reminds me, I had this thought in the theater because uh Keys wore a policeman's uniform when they were going in the game to like kill the guy, right? Which is what I would do, right? Like that's me to be in like the RP. And then Mouse wears the bunny suit, which is something that you would do, right? Not take the game fucking seriously. Just I'm gonna use the bunny skin because why not or whatever. And I remember laughing at that in the theater. I was like, this is a really accurate dynamic.
No, no, I absolutely get it, right? Like I think you're right. The thing that bothered me about him was like he like seemed like he was supposed to have an arc, and it just kind of like was told to us that like he had an arc rather than like it actually like happening, if that makes sense, right? Like he
Yeah,
like
he went kind of one moment too far. I thought there was a point when he was this voice of reason where he kept being like, "But Antoine, think of the players, right?" And like you can imagine that this guy is like an asshole, that he's flaming people in his Overwatch matches, that he, hears a girl on comms and tells her to go get a to go, make me a sandwich or
sandwich or
whatever.
whatever.
But at least he cares about the gamers, you might say. Like that seemed to be the arc that I thought that they were setting him up for, and he eventually does execute on that arc, but he does it so late. By at this point he has done so much heinous shit, he's like deleted all of these, I don't know, I thought that that was I don't know,
Yeah, no, I mean,
weird.
just like the end of the movie is like Keys is my boy. It's like you haven't acted like that at all. You kind of told him off at the
Yeah,
beginning of the
in
film,
fact you
and
kind of threw him under the bus,
yeah,
in fact. Like
um, and then he's working with them at fake indie studio. He's like programmer number 3, but I guess it's all made up because he told Keys to like go ask Millie out, and it's like yeah, it finally happened, right? Like
I was honestly really what I was like, holy fuck, is Key's gonna get cucked by like the fucking
Ryan Reynolds.
the AI that he designed or whatever? Because like, is that the moral of the moral? I tweeted this yesterday, which was completely unrelated to this, right? Which was I said,
Blade Runner 2049.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think everybody missed how bleak Ryan Gosling fucking his AI was in Blade Runner 2049, and that was because I watched a trailer, or I watched something. I might have watched a review, right? Like what somebody said about Free Guy, where they explained like the premise that like the romantic lead is Ryan Reynolds and he's falling in love with the real or whatever, and I was like, where are they gonna go with this?
Yeah.
Are they gonna uh, uh who knows, right?
So I think so. Just to comment on the 2049 thing, right? Like that picture I tweeted in reply to you, which is like Ryan Reynolds looking up at the giant version of his AI girlfriend.
Yeah,
Like,
that is the moment when it is so awful and heart because she has died, right?
yeah,
She's almost sort of sacrificed herself for him, in a way. And then the version of her that's the giant purple version, like, is trying to sell him a new one. And it's just like,
yeah. No,
that's so bleak.
the only thing I'm going to disagree with you on that is that nobody noticed it because I saw so many people who had that fucking picture as their avatar on Twitter. It's kind of
Yeah, I mean, at the time, I like Blade Runner 2049 a lot, and at the time, I commented on this because I really don't like the movie Her by I
it
can't remember
that's
somebody. Joaquin Phoenix is in there, Scarlett Johansson, um, where he falls in love with his AI or whatever, and that is like a sweet sort of. It's sad. It's a little
this
bit sad,
is
kind of like Eternal Spotless is sad, but it's like it's a romantic movie at the end of the day, right? And the thing that always bothered me,
Spike Jones. This is who it
Spike
was.
Jones is, yeah, Spike Jones is who I'm thinking of. Yeah, the Jackass guy making these like indie darling movies, right? So Spike Jones makes Her, and the thing that bothers me about Her has nothing to do with the film itself or the writing or the acting. It's just the raw premise of it, which is that like that's not how that would go. That is not how that would go at all. And Blade Runner 2049 gets it. You're gonna fuck your AI, and it's going to leave you this horrible, empty person. And really, anyway, so I thought that that might be where they go with Free Guy, where I was like, maybe they're gonna do a thing where she like uploads her consciousness into the thing, or she creates an AI version of herself or something. Um, but they end up doing the sweet thing, which is like he is a love letter to you from the other developer, and they get together, and that's fair enough, you know.
Although I will say that like so there are like four different like gets hit by a car in the middle of the street gags in this movie, and then they run out into the middle of the street and hug each other. I'm like, no, no,
Oh
no.
yeah, that's it. Yeah, because it gets hit by the train, and then there's another one where he gets hit.
He
I
gets
think this is actually a bit. So, do you know about the Brad Pitt getting hit by car meme?
no, I'm not familiar.
It's just like an ancient internet meme where one of the first, I think it was one of the first videos, not even on YouTube, but like on another clip thing, is a moment from the movie Meet Joe Black, where Brad Pitt's character walks across the street and he gets hit by two cars in this amazingly, like, spectacularly brutal car crash where he's walking and then one car hits him and he flies into the air, and then the other car, and then he falls onto another car and he like flies into the air. And the thing that made it funny at the time is that Meet Joe Black is a very dramatic movie, right? Meet Joe Black is about the avatar of death taking over Brad Pitt's body and leaving the like the Grim Reaper essentially, and leaving the responsibility of killing people behind because he wants a break and he falls in love with a human woman or whatever. And the thing that made that so funny was the just like it comes out of fucking nowhere in this incredibly sincere, like drama, right? About like, oh, the philosophical pontifications on obligation and death or whatever. And there's this moment in the movie where Brad Pitt just gets completely demolished by a fucking car. Anyway, I'm pretty sure when Guy gets hit by the two cars exactly like that, it is that moment. Like I feel like I maybe I'm crazy. I feel like it's an inside joke that they recreated that frame for frame or whatever. Um and like that's where that was coming from. So yeah, people getting hit by cars is a big thing.
Yeah, and then they run out into the middle of the street at the at the denouement, I guess, of the movie, right? And what was And so Nick says in the chat, this would make a great transition to a fantasy thing. They're like an isekai. Like I don't know if you've watched any isekais, buddy. Like the anime genre where it's like transported to a fantasy world. Usually, it's like the protagonist like gets hit by a car or something, and then they like wake up in a fantasy world or something. Or that's one of the versions of it. Um, but yes, that would be a fun ending to the movie. Is like they get hit and they just wake up inside of their stupid indie game.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, even the indie game itself, and I don't want to shoot myself in the foot here because obviously I love indie games, and I think that there are good indie games that are sort of similar to this. But this game, which is just like, oh, you just go and you watch NPCs go about their lives or whatever. And I'm just sitting there and I'm just like, that game would be boring as fuck. Nobody would buy that game.
Yeah, I mean, it also depends too, right? Like, because like the thing that immediately popped in my mind is like the comparison they're trying to the Sims. Nick points out, which makes
No, but
sense.
The Sims, you have control. This is the thing. The Sims, you control them, right?
Yeah,
You direct all of their you are, and it is very gamified, right? You are trying to achieve these goals, make money, get better stuff, have these, Sims get promoted in their jobs or whatever else, right? But I don't, and the part when they had all the streamers be like, yeah, I'm really thinking about not killing NPCs for a while, which is just like,
see,
no, that nope, nobody would ever,
well, so
ever in their lives do that. I feel like.
the thing that got to me though was like is that like they play it like like all games are like dumb shooters and like the world needs something. It's like there's plenty of games that are like not like that, right? Like Second Life is like it was a huge MMO, right? Still is a
Yep.
huge MMO, right? Like you don't need to like I don't know. These were like the things that like scratched at me. There was like this doesn't make sense from like somebody who knows like a little bit about video games, right? Like some of it does, but like some of it really doesn't, which just is kind of like irritated me.
I feel like it's written. I don't know. I don't know anything about these writers, so I'm speculating. But I feel like it's written by a guy who is like, he plays GTA 5 and he plays Call of Duty. GTA 5 is a really big influence, you can tell
Yeah,
here
yeah,
or whatever. And he plays Call of Duty, and you just kind of assume that this guy is like, he doesn't pay any attention to games sort of beyond that. He buys the Call of Duty every year, and between updates on whatever, maybe he'll go play like Battlefield or whatever, and has a very shallow understanding of how games actually. It's just so weird. It's like saying, it's like if one of these satire movies about movies doesn't recognize that there are like dramas that exist or whatever. It's like, you know what, we need less action. It's like Tropic Thunder. Imagine if Tropic Thunder ended with going like, maybe we don't need big blockbuster action movies anymore. Maybe we need thoughtful character dramas where you know actors get to really act or whatever. It's like, obviously these exist. We all know these exist, right? Tropic Thunder makes fun of this, right? Like, because it has the fake movies within the movie making fun of Oscar bait movies. And I feel like if you're going to do the same thing for video games, you just need to do your homework better than this, right? At least to be convincing, I
yeah,
guess.
yeah. I'm thinking to somebody who knows what they're watching, right? Like again, I'm a little bit like if this is aimed at like my mom, right? Like maybe I get it, right? Like it's like my mom probably thinks that all video games are all violent, and that maybe we could use some like some nice peaceful video games because she does like she still calls all video games Nintendo, right? Like,
Yeah.
um, but like anybody who like actually plays these games, so there's something in the back of my memory, and maybe I'm misremembering this, but I think at some point like maybe like 10-15 years ago Ryan Reynolds said that like video games are for children or something, and like maybe he's trying to atone for that now, like like all these years later, but yeah,
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. This seems like the perfect movie for Henry Cavill. I
yeah,
wish to God, because like part of his whole thing is that he is like also a gamer. Um, and so I feel like this is like the perfect kind of, I don't know, just the perfect kind of movie for somebody like him, or even somebody like I don't know, I don't know. I don't have a better other person. I just feel like Ryan Reynolds is really not correct for this part.
mm,
At least the part of Guy himself, in the way that he is written.
yeah, I see that. I get it. You know what would be great for this? I feel like Paul Rudd would be great in this
Paul
position
Rudd probably would be great, actually.
because he could
Yeah,
he
I
could.
was the thing I thought immediately was Jack Black, because Jack Black kind of had like Jack Black, the YouTuber, famous YouTuber Jack Black,
Mm,
right? Um, and he understands video games. You can tell, like Jumanji, which I think the is the best. Have I said that Jumanji
this
is
is
the
the
best
best
video
video
game
game
movie?
many times.
Yeah,
Yes.
it is. Okay, yeah, I wasn't sure if I had laid staked that claim. I have staked that claim. Jumanji is the best movie about video games, right? And one of the things that makes that work so well is Jack Black gets it. Also, The Rock gets it, to be fair, but The Rock would not work in this at all. So you know, there's that.
Yeah. Yeah. Boy. So, you got anything else to say about this movie?
Man, I feel like we talked about most of it. What else did I think about this movie? Yeah, I don't know. I
Yeah. I mean, other.
Script is bad. Ryan Reynolds isn't right for the part. Game development is nothing like this.
Yeah.
Like
I've got a couple more calls that way. Like the one of the things that like leapt out at me, and just from as like as a software guy or like a software engineer, right? Is like they're kicking him out of the building, and he like apparently he was doing all of his development on a personal laptop that they're letting him keep
oh
as
yeah,
you.
I know. Oh my god, the rules on that are so insanely strict. This is another thing that people will never understand about AAA gaming, right? The rules on how you are able to like do the work are incredibly strict because nobody ever wants the code getting out. Yeah.
I mean, that's like let's like
Yeah. I mean,
every
that's just right good information security, right?
yeah every job I've worked at, like it's the computer's been like dedicated to that, like it's been a company computer, right? And like they weren't all like super locked down or whatever, but like if you're fired, your like the first thing is your laptop's getting taken from you and you're being frog marched out of the building, right? Like
Yep.
it's
Also, Nick notes in the chat, director Sean Levy originally read the script in 2016, but passed on it. Several years later, Levy was introduced to Ryan Reynolds by Hugh Jackman, a mutual friend, and the pair decided to work on Free Guy after rereading the script together. Reynolds, who also produced the film, said, "I haven't been this fully immersed and engaged in something since Deadpool." So yeah, I definitely agree that Reynolds was too involved in making the movie to not star with it. This is actually a pretty common thing, where a big movie star, like if like one of the things that they say to like screenwriters is like, if you write your script and can get a big movie star attached to it, that's the way it gets, that's like the way it gets sold, right? Because like, you know the number of scripts that producers and directors buy far outweigh the number of scripts that ever get produced, right? Most screenwriters make their money by selling scripts that don't get produced because 9 out of 10 of them never go anywhere, right? um, but if you do want one of your scripts to make it to the big screen, the best way to do that is to like get a big actor attached to it in whatever version that looks like. So I definitely feel that. I also just wonder if I don't like I wonder if Ryan Reynolds kind of understands where he falls in the sort of movie, it's sort of like the actor pantheon, right? Like, does he understand the sort of implications of him starring in a movie at this time and date? I don't know, right? Whereas, for instance, like I think Will Smith, who has made a lot of really bad movies recently, Will Smith really understands the movies he's in, and the parts he kind of tailors to him, except for his song in Aladdin, which is really bad because they don't change it, and I hate it.
okay.
I'm sorry,
Okay.
it's a whole other thing. I have lots of thoughts about Will Smith and his career. He was the biggest movie star in the world for a long time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Rest in peace. And by that I mean The
His
Rock.
career. Oh.
Will Smith did not see what The Rock. I guess there's probably somebody between them. Maybe like Tom Cruise in the early 2010s before The Rock really took off.
Hmm.
Was a bigger movie star.
The only other thing about this movie that like really caught my attention was that this has like an 84% critic rating and a 96% fan rating on Rotten Tomatoes. At least when I checked, I was like, well, I guess I can't trust anybody anymore because this movie is
What the
terrible.
fuck?
Yeah, right.
Is it because they don't understand? Maybe it's just the game dev stuff. Like because we're too close to tech industry,
Yeah.
you know, and too close to games itself. Like
So
I don't
so
know.
this might be just like another one of my kind of like Rotten Tomatoes rants, right? Like one of the best, highest rated movies on Rotten Tomatoes is Paddington, which I thought was like whatever. It's like it's not bad enough to get a thumbs down, so like you broadly gets thumbs ups, and that's what the score is, right? Is like the ratio of positive things. So like even if it's like a soft thumbs up because it doesn't matter, like you end up with high scores. Metacritic is only 62, is Nick points out, which makes sense to me, right? Like if you give it like a middling to, first of all, I think Metacritic has a lot more gamers on it, and saying if you give it to like a middling score, then you're gonna like that'll look like a thumbs up on a Rotten Tomatoes, but it's still bad, like, or you'll in a numerical rating system, you'll be pushed down the scale, but like in kind of like a thumbs up or down, you'll end up with a thumbs up. And
Listen,
that's, I
the
think,
other review I need to know is Doug Walker from Channel Awesome, and he says, though familiar, Free Guy has enough charm from its main lead and its supporting cast to get a fair amount of laughs with a fair amount of heart. I don't actually hold Doug Walker in high esteem. I recommend everybody go watch the foldable human video on Doug Walker's The Wall, which famously was like the internet lolcow for a couple of days, a couple of years ago. But yeah, I don't know, man. Reading some of these makes me feel, I don't know.
Doug Walker is like, it's like a meme within himself at this point, right?
Yeah, he really is. But I'm just like, I'm looking at some of these, like Ryan Reynolds is at top scale in this clever video game comedy. Like,
Person who's
I
never
just,
played a video game.
yeah, maybe. I don't know.
Oh
Because, like,
man,
what's that clever about it? I did not think this movie was
no,
clever at all.
I mean, like there were some like decent jokes in it, right? Like there were times that I laughed, right? Like
Yeah.
like like I was a little disappointed, honestly, with like I thought him taking off his glasses and putting it on Dude was like smart, right? Like I thought there was gonna be like that. This was gonna be like and your eyes have been opened and you are free now, Dude, right? But no, it's just kind of like he's a dumb meat sack thing, which was a little bit disappointing. But it's,
Yeah,
it is what it
I
is.
also liked that moment. I don't know.
Fucking Black Widow has an 80% on this too, so whatever.
Ooh, that's interesting. Did I like this more? I liked Squad much more than this. I liked F9 more than this. I don't know if I liked Black Widow more than this. Wow, is Black Widow the worst movie I've seen recently? I don't know. I haven't seen Space Jam 2, which I want to and should get around to at some point.
Paw Patrol has 100% on Rotten Tomatoes.
Well, it's the best movie of all time, obviously.
Yeah.
I'm trying to see if like Kotaku or like Polygon put out a, like I wonder what like a gamer, I don't know.
Yeah. Oi, 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 oi. I just, I don't know. This Rotten Tomato site is like not good anymore. Like they used to have like a nice thing on the left hand corner of like new at the box office, and it appears to not be working. And I don't get it, and I don't like new things, buddy, anymore. Um, I just I want things to be the way they were when they were good back in like the aughts. That's when everything good was.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I guess. Anyway, what else is what
Uh,
else is going on? Are we done with Free Guy? Do we have anything left to say about Free Guy?
I don't know if I can think of anything else. You got anything else
Where
you want
does
to?
it fall in your like pantheon of video game movies?
I mean, most video game movies are abjectly terrible. So like this, so I think one of the best comparisons to movies would be Ready Player One. I think this is worse than Ready Player One because Ready Player One at least had good spectacle.
And
Uh,
Ready Player One, I think, had much more heart.
yeah,
Ready
I agree.
Player One, like Ready Player One sidesteps this weird thing about, is it a good idea to kill NPCs in video games or whatever? And it's just all about, I mean, Ready Player One is basically just saying your WoW friends are real. Like
Yeah,
that's the
yeah,
theme of that, which I think is that's
yeah.
a perfect theme for a movie that is so about video games,
And it
right?
hand waves all the technical stuff, right? Like it doesn't try.
Exactly. Yes, absolutely. Right.
Yeah,
There's one thing about that. I think we talked about this in our initial review where the thing that he has to do is drive backwards, and
Yeah.
nobody ever drives backwards to do the race or whatever. It was like somebody would have done that.
Uh,
Somebody would have figured that out. But
No,
really,
within
I
like
don't think
15
there's
minutes. Yeah.
anything else. Yeah, I don't think there's anything else in that movie that
Yeah. I mean, so the movie's a little bit cringe, but like it's earnest, right? Like,
yeah.
whereas like this movie feels kind of like, not only does it feel like schlocky, but it also feels very like, I don't know. I think I'm with you in that like if they didn't do like this kind of like bullshit like tie-in montage at the end, I would have been a lot more on
Yeah,
board with it.
holy shit, I would have been so much happier.
Yeah, like yeah. Well, no, that's Free Guy. I think you're ultimately right that it's like it's it's a thing that like at the end of the day doesn't matter so much, right? Like, but what have you done with your week?
What have I done with my week? So have I told you that I'm back? I've started playing Hearthstone again.
Ooh,
After a year away from the game, I have come back to play Hearthstone, and it is fun, but also weird and bad, but also fun. Everybody does well. It's man, it is interesting thinking about looking at Hearthstone now compared to looking at it years ago. Where the big complaint years ago was all of this like discover random generation, right? Where you need to build in extra value to your deck than just the deck itself, in order to win these games. And I like that because I think it creates a lot of variance and it creates a lot of like fun interactions, right? Um, Part of what makes Hearthstone fun is a lot of actually what I think makes EDH fun as a like Commander as a Magic format, which is that there is just a lot more. The decks aren't as consistent, and there's a lot more variance. And I'm now in a situation that is almost entirely the opposite. There is not as much kind of like random generation in the game, mostly because the game is much faster. It's a very like aggro. It's a very aggro meta, and it's also what people are calling a solitaire meta, because there's a lot of decks that win with sort of OTK. They don't interact with your board at all, right? So for instance, there's a version of Spell Mage right now where your deck is all spells. You use cards to reduce the mana cost of spells in your deck by a bunch, and then you also use cards to you when you cast card like, spells of different schools, you cast a Fire Frost Arcane spell, you progress through what's called a quest line, and a quest line has a couple of different things. You fulfill a thing, you get a thing, you fulfill a thing, you get a thing, and the final reward is a big powerful minion. The big powerful minion for Mage says you have spell damage +3 for the rest of the game. So you slam that, and then you just go face with everything. You just fireball, frostbolt, all this stuff hitting face over and over and over. That deck is pretty uninteractive. At the end of the day, that deck is just about completing its quest, not dealing with your board, ignoring your board, freezing your board, clearing your board, and then hitting you in the face with a bunch of spells at the end of the day, right? Um, which I have actually weirdly found to be pretty interesting, and I'm on board for, and I think that that's cool, I guess. I don't know. I'm just like interested in the overall sort of context of this meta, and I'm really having to sort of like re process the metagame because I just haven't seen a lot of these cards before because I haven't played the last three sets, right? Um, and so, even though Hearthstone has gone in an entirely different direction than the direction I like for Hearthstone, it is fun, which is a weird. That's it. That's my report on Hearthstone. Oh, also they added another thing called duels, which are insanely fun, and this thing, which is kind of like a PvP dungeon mode, where the dungeon mode is sort of this roguelike. You know, you build a deck, you take a bunch of, you take a card after each of the things, you get these treasures that make your deck function in like really crazy ways. I played a bunch of duels, and duels are nuts because they are just insanely, like they're these insanely powerful hero powers and treasures like cards you put in your deck or whatever. But the interesting thing that I found about duels is that it's like arena, but in the sense that you buy a ticket into it and you get a pack out of it if you do well enough or whatever, but you use your collection to build your initial starting deck. So your deck, the first 16 cards in your deck, are going to be cards from your collection, but you're then going to progressively add more and more cards randomly as you go, which I think is just like a neat digital card game sort of behavior, and I'm probably going to play a lot more of it. I had a really good time with the duels that I did read.
Awesome. Yeah. Very cool. Did we ever talk about Back for Blood? Because we played that like a little
Yeah, oh,
bit.
we did play Back for Blood. What did you think about Back for Blood?
I am. This is falling into the same problem that I always have with these types of games, which is like if everybody's not on board and communicating well, things go south really fast, and that is unendingly frustrating to me. And sometimes it's me messing up too, right? Like I screwed up a couple of doors, and we were played through like the first segment, but it's like someone shot the birds, we're fucked, right? Like and or like someone someone went up on ahead without saying anything, right? And like fucked the team up, right? Like, and I just like it's frustrating to me when people don't play that thing, and also like it's not super fun for me to just like play like like follow the rules, like follow the rules very strictly so that you get the maximum. Like that's just like not super fun to me. So
Yeah. I think I am a little bit also down on Back for Blood. I think Back for Blood has potential, I guess is what I'll say. And I've played a lot of these games, right? In fact, if any game has sort of defined, I feel like my play over the last year, it is specifically WoW, the Mythic Plus section of WoW, right? That's most of what I'm playing WoW for, and that's most of what makes WoW fun. And it's a very similar thing, right? It's you and a couple of guys, and you are running through the dungeon, and you have kind of these objectives, and stuff is affecting you, and you gain power or whatever over the course of the dungeon. And I just think that Mythic Plus is so well refined at this point, because it's been a game mode in WoW for years, for more than 5 years at this point. Um, and it has just been iterated on enough that it's really fun and really engaging, in a way that I'm not sure any of these other sort of like co-op PvE games have really sort of like hit the spot. They all kind of become weirdly rote at a point where you sort of just master everything. But the infinite scaling nature of Mythic Plus, where you're just constantly going up and it's getting higher and higher, and it's also very segmented out, right? Which is sort of like Rifts in Diablo, or similar to this, right? Where the it's not just about progressing from like easy to hard. It's progressing from +2 to +15. There's a lot more breakpoints in there to get more and more difficult as you increase. Um, yeah, I don't know. That's sort of my thing. It just feels like Back for Blood is extremely unrefined in the face of better games that have been around longer doing this thing, you know,
I think
over time.
I think I agree with you on that. I think the like part of it's like the mastery has to feel like it matters in a certain way, right? Um and that like you're kind of building in a way that's like satisfying instead of just doing the same thing over and over again. And not
Yep.
that I played enough Back for Blood to like really get there, but like I could feel it starting to creep in. Like I felt this a lot with Destiny, right? Like at a certain point, I stopped caring about like doing the content in Destiny because it's all very similar. And like there's only so far that like really nice feeling shooting can carry you. And like I enjoyed Destiny at some point mostly for the multiplayer because that was like a classic kind of shooter thing, which is something I can get into. Um,
Hmm.
but yeah, um, like the thing I think that works for me for rating and for mythics, even though I haven't done a ton of mythics myself, but like I can see how I would like them. It's like number go up, right? Like my mythic mythic rating goes up for me in rates. It's like getting my hitting DPS parses, right? Like that's the thing that I can like get into enough to care about, but like it feels like that just isn't. It didn't feel like I was there in Back for Blood. So
Yeah, I also think that on an execution level, because in a weird way, because WoW is slower and more intricate in terms of rotation, right? You have better kind of cognitive feedback. I know. So, okay, one of the things I like about Arms Warrior is that Arms Warrior is a very complicated spec, right? Where you don't want to max out on rage, right? You never want to be at 100 rage and then you hit an auto attack and then your all of that extra rage gets dumped, essentially, right? Because any rage that you generate past 100 doesn't count. That is a waste, right? But you also don't want to be too low on rage because every 6 seconds you want to press Mortal Strike. It's the strongest ability in your rotation, and if you don't hit, you like most of your DPS comes from Mortal Strike. So it's about okay, I have to have at least 30 rage every 6 seconds, but I don't want to go above 100 rage. Like I don't want to sit too much, because if I sit too much, like, and there's a lot of tension in that, right? Where I'm also going, um, like, okay, I'm going to sneak a slam in here to get an overpower, which increases my, like, and to try and find additional damage. But it's also like, okay, I'm going to sit on this global cooldown. I'm going to sit on this GCD because I want to save that rage for the mortal strike that's going to come up in a second or whatever, right? Like, that's a very complex set of tactics that are just happening on my execution level, which tends not to happen in these shooters, right? With shooters, it is basically just hit the guy, maybe hit the head, maybe time your reloads, right? On an execution level, which I think that is complex, and I think that that is intricate, right? But there's not a lot of moments where I'm sitting in a shooter and I'm like, I should have reloaded. I should have taken that second of downtime to reload my guns, right? There are a lot of times when I'm executing my rotation in WoW where I'm like, fuck, that slam was not worth it, right? I gimped myself because I delayed my mortal strike by a second and a half or something, right? Like these sorts of things where, when am I overextending? When am I saving? When am I holding my cooldowns? Right, like that kind of stuff, are just like more complex decisions than any of the decisions I really had in Back for Blood. And I don't really know what you do about that, right? Like, the complexity even goes up from there if you think about it. I mean, like, in terms of Mythic Plus, I'm very rarely, part of what I've talked about on the cast is that I almost don't even ever think about my rotation. It is entirely like functioning in the back end of my subconscious at that point, because what I'm thinking about are, what are the enemies I'm facing, what needs to be interrupted, what needs to be stunned, how can I, do this, like all those sort of macro decisions. And I think those decisions do come across well in games like Back for Blood, Killing Floor, like those decisions are definitely in there. Um, but just like the raw execution level, which it feels like is the building block to a more macro strategic level, just isn't, I guess, which is frustrating.
Yeah.
Listen, we have a troll in the chat, you guys. AQ40 Fury Warrior with Purple Scarab Boy for life, Sunder Armor on repeat. Listen, I understand. I understand these.
Uh,
There are times when I miss Thunder Armor. I had a big conversation about this with some of my game dev friends, where we were talking about maintenance buffs, right? Which are these buffs that, like, slice and dice is a big one for rogues, right? Which is just something you want it up at all times. It increases your attack speed by a bunch. I keep slice and dice up. Is that fun gameplay, or is that like boring and bad? And I kind of feel like there are two.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, monks used to have one, like, because Tiger Palm and something else used to be like, there used to be a filler ability, and then the Tiger Palm had to be hit every once in a while to like keep up the buff.
Oh, you're right. It was Jab. It was just called Jab,
Yeah,
right?
Jab was the
Where
basic. Tiger Palm put
Yeah,
a
so you
buff.
tiger palmed to like ignore some armor, and you just had to keep the tiger palm buff up. Actually, so my argument is that is good game design. I think it's important to have basic things in a rotation to master, right? And yes, that does suck if you are very good at the game and you understand the importance of this stuff. That can feel kind of like trite. But I think having kind of like easy breakpoints to help people sort of ease into, like a mastery curve is good, and I think that's good game design.
I disagree because it makes it much easier to be very worse. Um,
Really interesting.
I
Really?
mean, this is it's a little bit tongue in cheek, right? But like, just like some of the people that I like that I've done. I guess LFR is the biggest example. Just like,
Hmm.
you look at like how they're like parsing. It's like, are you even like hitting buttons on the GCD, right? Like, and then you
I
think,
you know I totally get this, but my thing is that, like, I totally get that, to be honest. Like, I've had friends who have come to play the game, and they just, frankly, they don't know what they're doing. And I'm sitting there at maybe they're streaming on like Discord or Twitch or something. And I had one friend who was playing Arcane Mage, and they hadn't played the game for a very long time, and they just came back, right? And they were playing Arcane Mage, and they thought that the best way to play Arcane Mage was to spam arcane missiles, because arcane missiles deals the most damage, right? It is the most obvious when it comes to doing number to number. arcane missiles is what you cast. Arcane missiles has a very hefty mana cost though, and the point of arcane missiles in the rotation is that yes, it does do big damage, but it also costs big mana. And if you just spam arcane missiles on repeat, you will the shit out of yourself, and you can't do anything, right? So really, the what you should be doing is arcane blast, and then you doing the kind of the real rotation or whatever. And I think that that's
No,
that's
no,
bad in a
yeah,
way,
yeah, no,
right? But like, I don't
it's
know. I just feel like you need a ramp for folks, and being able to say keep slice and dice up all the time. That'll help you do better. Is
yeah.
a nice thing.
I guess the flip side of that I see is like that's the thing that for them not to keep up and for them not to like be helping with. Um, but I think you're probably right. It's just a matter of like getting people into the right place and like LFR doesn't matter so much. Um, you know, I've I mean, if I'm going to be frank, I think like maybe a couple expansions ago, the guild was a little bit worse about this. Like I remember
Yeah.
being like, I don't play this game enough to be this high up on the DPS charts for our guild. And I feel like that's less true now, which is good. Um,
Mm,
uh, uh, but
yeah,
yeah,
I think that also part of it is that you get better at this stuff over time. Humans are naturally progressive.
right,
This is my core philosophy, right? We get better at things over time, and that includes playing video games. So at a certain point, if you have been playing the video game for years on end, you're just gonna naturally get better at. You're just naturally gonna get better at it. There are people in the raid now who I will like compete. Like I'll compete for the top spot with those people who 5 years ago I would have said like they're garbage. I mean,
yeah,
honestly, I was pretty garbage 5 years ago. Like, I think the player that I am now is just much better. I never would have been getting, you know. I remember trying so hard to time a plus 14 dungeon in Legion. It was just the hardest possible thing. I could not figure out. We just couldn't. We just didn't have the DPS for it. We didn't have the healing for it. We just wiped to shit or whatever. And now I'm like, that's a baby key. That is baby mode, right?
yeah. No, that's I'm sure that's definitely fair enough. But yeah, no, I think I fundamentally agree with you that like you get better as the game as you play. And I think there's like natural pushes in that direction, right? Like I know that there are points where like I start to like be like, oh, how do I push this a little bit more? It's like, oh, I'll take the optimal choice instead of the one that's a little bit easier, right? Like, um, you know,
Yeah, I also think that there are small things. So, for instance, I don't think people quite understand the value of a very good opener in Warcraft raiding, right? Like something that I do that's specific to my class, for instance, is my opener includes popping Avatar, hitting Colossus Smash, and then hitting a Mortal Strike, and then Blade Storming, right? Which is just because Mortal Strike is so powerful. It's like 40% of my damage at the end of a parts is going to come from Mortal Strike, right? That when you're blade storming, you want Mortal Strike to be on cooldown for the duration of the blade storm. So you Mortal Strike, blade storm, Mortal Strike. That is a stronger opener than a version where you run in Avatar, Colossus Smash, Blade Storm. But I think there are a lot of people who won't slide in that Mortal Strike, and it probably doesn't affect things by too much. But you know, in a world where that like you are splitting those kinds of hairs into parts, those are the hairs to be split.
yeah, I absolutely agree, absolutely agree. Um, so what
What
else?
else have you been playing? Did you beat Grime?
Not yet. Um,
Okay.
I've been bouncing around some other things, but I am trucking through it. I am uh into. I just finished. I just beat the boss that I messaged you to talk about. I don't know if you saw what was his name?
The Vulture or
No. This is
Fidus?
Fidus, yeah.
Okay.
Like Fancy Fidus or whatever his name is. Shapely Fidus. That's
Shapely
Fidus.
Fidus.
Yeah. I just beat him. And I haven't gone back to it in a couple minutes, but it's so there. It's interesting running through this game because I think it's very good, but like you can also see like I can see like little things that like those platforms that slide in and out. Sometimes they're hard to see, right? Like
Mm.
sometimes they don't, and like or like something that I thought was like very like things that like I didn't quite see initially, like things I had to look up on guides were like those red vines that you can dash through. The first time I did it, I was like spaced so that I bumped into it. I was like, oh, I can't dash through these. This must be a thing.
Yeah. Yep, that would make it hard. Hmm.
Right. And so like, I was like, well, where am I supposed to go now? I was like, oh, I can dash through them. I just like screwed it up on the first time, right? And like I think the first time you see them, it's not like you have like a super easy um run through it. Just like little things like that. It don't make the game bad, it's just like, lacking a little bit of polish, right? Like
Yeah, I think that there's other, like, there's a moment in that whole section where there are, I don't know if you did this, there's spikes on the ground or whatever,
and you
and
have to parry them.
yeah, and you have to parry them, right?
But I didn't
This is a
realize you could parry.
huge thing. It is all over, like, in the Discord and Steam or whatever. People will be like, "How the fuck do I do these spikes or whatever?" And everybody gets to the replies and like, "You have to parry them." And I, on one hand, I do think the game accurately communicates that because it is clear about what you can and cannot parry via kind of like coloring. But it also just feels that doesn't feel correct in a way.
Yeah. No,
And I don't really know how to.
static what's it called? Static environment hazards don't feel like they're supposed to be parryable. I think,
Exactly. Yeah, it really does. It does not feel like it's supposed to be parryable. So, it's one of those things where I definitely get it. And it's like, yeah, I don't know. I definitely get
No,
it.
yeah. There's this moment where you're like riding on like one of those spool things, and like there's just like a line of them bringing down. And I got to it the first time just by like eating. Like I had enough health to like eat them all. I'm like, there's no way that this is the way I'm supposed to be able to get through this, right? It's just like eat like 7 different hits, right? Like,
What? So, are you still going the strength build?
um, yeah, strength and a little bit of resolve, and I've been putting up force and health as I've been going along too.
Okay.
Although I picked up the drill at some point, and I increased my resolve to like be able to use the drill. So I might try and fool around with like the wisp lantern and the drill.
People say that resonance builds
Resonance, not
are
resonance.
a meme, but also that they're amazing. I think the default, most people go Dex,
Yeah.
which I don't. I maybe it just feels like, I think part of it is that the Dex weapons were a little bit better on release, and then they got balanced pretty quickly. Um, or I'm sorry, the strength weapons got buffed, not the dex weapons got brought down. So I think a lot of people sort of like invested in dexterity off the bat because it just felt the most, like the most accurately. You just did it, they did the thing the best, right? Um, but apparently, I feel like resonance builds are really nuts. And people on like the forums and stuff have been going crazy for, specifically the burst lantern, because like the burst lantern has that unique interaction of like just like doing a gazillion damage to like bosses or like hunt enemies, right? So it's kind of like a really good weapon for the most dangerous mobs out there. Um,
No, that makes sense. Yeah.
yeah.
And like it's no, it's I think part of the thing with the dex weapons too is like I think fast weapons just feel a little bit better because like if you're on a wind up and you get hit out of it, it feels really bad, right? Like, and that's like half my life at this point. Also, like these little things like the unformed slab that I've been using, which I
Mm,
like. Like there's not a lot that I can toss anymore. So like like that secondary use just like doesn't get used as much. And like
yeah.
really the wind up on the pillar slab is just a little too much for it to be like really useful.
Mm,
Like I've basically stopped. I've basically been using the unformed slab almost exclusively. I've been switching out other things just to like feel it out. Because it took me a handful of attempts to get to bring down Shapely Fightus. Um, but it's a fun game. I've been enjoying it. Other things I've done, I've been playing some more Guilty Gear, which is just fun. They just announced a new character, Jacko, who's like an old character, but like it's dumb Guilty Gear lore, but I won't go into it. But like, the big thing that was pointed out to me today is that the main character of Guilty Gear is Soul Bad Guy, right? Who is actually a good guy, and his real name isn't Soul Bad Guy. And that this is strange because there's this other character, Saul Goodman, who's kind of a bad guy, and it's like this, almost the same name.
yeah.
um,
Oh.
no, but like so that was fun. Also, friend, I've been playing. I dipped my toes back into Apex last week, which is a lot of fun, and earlier this weekend I played Splitgate, which is a in beta now. It's I think going to be free to play. It's like a Halo style shooter but with portals. And
Okay.
it's neat. And it kind of scratches that itch a bunch. I don't know if I'm going to be in it for the long term, but like it's got very like if the weapons feel very Halo style, and the portal stuff is neat, but I haven't really gotten used to it enough to like really be into it. But like if you want some like TDM fun, I've been having fun with it. Um, those are the big things. The other thing is I finished Dune, and it's a great book. Highly recommend it to anyone. And I've started on Dune Messiah, which is a bit different. I might do the whole roll on this. I don't know if you've any knowledge of like the Dune multiverse, but like
I don't, but I'm intrigued, to say the least, I guess. Don't do it. I feel like almost all of these series end up in a pretty
so
shitty place.
so part of it is Frank Herbert writes 6 of them and then he dies, then his son takes over, and people really don't like the son's books. But these are the things that I've heard. Stop after the first one. Stop after the third one, like Lou says. Friend of the cast, actually, who's hyper indexed, says stop at least read up to the fourth one, which has got Emperor of Dune. People say stop after the Frank Herbert books, which um, are the first 6. Then I've heard some people say that you should read like so. They found some of his notes and they wrote 2 that are a continuation of the first. They wrap up what happens in the 6th book, but that involves skipping over the 2 prequel trilogies. I've also heard that the Brian Herbert stuff gets unfairly maligned because it's more pop sci-fi, and they're fine in their own right, but they're sitting in Frank Herbert's shadow, so they're bad. Or so people think they're bad, even though they're not. Um,
Wow, this is a whole myriad of
yeah.
opinions. Okay.
Um, and people like, and he keeps writing them, right? Like so. There's a 12-year time skip between the first book and the second book, and they're
Mm.
like the books that like he's writing books right now that take place halfway, that take place between the first and the second book. So he's
Man,
up.
could you imagine being the son of a super famous author and you inherit the IP to a super famous IP and you can just fucking publish your fan fiction?
Yeah,
That
no,
would be sweet.
yeah, it would be. Yeah, and everybody hates you for it, but you don't care because you keep selling
Everybody hates it but you don't care. You own it, right? Like
and
people really like
and people
Christopher
keep buying
Tolkien, I
it, right?
guess.
Like,
Yeah, that's also true, right? Yeah. Yeah, people really like Christopher Tolkien, I guess. So I maybe they don't hate you for it necessarily, but
yeah.
I don't know. Every science fiction series I have ever engaged with has devolved at some
Oh,
point.
this
So,
we've talked. This is Mango's iron rule of of world building.
yeah, absolutely.
Every time, any world that goes on for long enough will get stupid. Like,
Yeah. I mean, even yeah, absolutely.
yeah, but yes. Did you have a further thought? I didn't mean to
No,
interrupt
I
you.
mean, I just think I was about to list off a million examples of that taking place.
Yeah, I mean, like, I feel like we're getting there with WoW, right? Like, especially if you look at the deep
Mhm.
stuff, right? Like the deep fucking Elder Scrolls lore, right? Like, I've gone out about like the lessons of Vivek long enough, right? Like,
I mean, people really hate like current WoW lore, and I like a lot of current WoW lore. Specifically, I like WoW lore kind of in the same way I like BVS, which is that I can sense that it's clear that they're being ambitious, and I appreciate ambition a lot, right? Um, I think the Sylvanas character arc and the Tyrande character arc are both like really ambitious stories to tell in like the modern version of WoW compared to Mancrick's wife or whatever, right? Very basic bargain bin sort of stuff. Um, but yeah, people really hate the lore of WoW. My problem, can I just say, my problem with people criticizing WoW is they say that the jailer is Thanos because needs to collect the sigils or whatever and open the thing and do the thing.
do the death
The
thing.
jailer is not Thanos. He is Darkseid because he's trying to mind control everyone. He wants everyone to serve him. That's his thing. That's Darkseid's thing. That's not Thanos' thing. Thanos just wants to kill you. Darkseid wants to subjugate you. So that's my gripe with current criticisms about like the jailer and WoW lore or whatever. I'm sure we'll do like a big Shadowlands, like wrap up where we'll talk about all this stuff in the future. But
No,
yeah.
I think WoW has aged a little bit better just because like the by its nature the narrative moves pretty slow. But my general rule is for fantasy worlds, it gets dumb when it starts going when fantasy worlds start going to space is when it starts to get dumb. Right? Like I feel this way basically about like a lot of the D&D stuff that passes through too, right? Like once you start
Extra
going to
planar shit.
yeah.
Yeah.
Um and like I feel like usually there's some version of going to
Yeah,
space, right?
Spelljammer,
Yeah.
absolutely. I get
Yeah.
that for sure.
Or like
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I like this stuff with Shadowlands. Part of my problem with WoW lore is that it's very speculative, which bothers me. So for instance, there's like a lot of mysteries about what's going on, right? And I think they're there because there's this community of like YouTubers or and like of just people in general who want to like decode WoW lore, right? They want to predict where it's going. So these are like the jailer turned the Primus into the Rune Carver, right? Like that's like it's a thing. It got confirmed in 9.1, which we learned about in the story or whatever. Um, and I think that's the weird because this is a good version of it. But like, so for instance, at the end of 9.1, we learn the jailer's whole backstory, right? He was the original arbiter. He rose up against the first ones, and his brethren on the pantheon of death cast him out. And the Primus invented domination magic to subjugate him and confine him to the maw, and all this, like all this other stuff or whatever. We're learning that now at the end of 9.1 when I'm just like, why didn't we learn this right off the bat, right? Like, wouldn't it have made sense for like the Archon or the Winter Queen or anybody who's there, right? Renathal is the first Venthyr. Obviously, he would have been able to tell us this shit. Um, to just kind of say like, oh yeah, the jailer, that dude is the first is the first arbiter, right? And he got cast out. He's doing the Satan story thing or whatever. I feel like I spent all this time with the jailer in 9.0 where honestly he was really fucking annoying because he kept like whispering in my ear saying no one escapes the maw or whatever, like dumb shit. And I didn't really understand what he was or what he was doing. And I like that there is this backstory now. And I just sort of wish it came way sooner, right? And I feel like the reason that it didn't is because it left all this room for people to speculate and YouTubers to make videos like, you won't believe I'm, connecting all the dots. The jailer was the original arbiter. And I'm sure if you're the person who pitched that and figured it out, that's cool. I'm sure that's great. But oh god, it's frustrating. That
so
would require them to know where they're going with this story.
so my you're gonna hate me for this, but the take is probably like, you got to keep the subs going somehow, right? Like that feels like a very much like well, we got to have something at the end of it, and we don't have a better revelation, so it's got to be that that Zovral is the original arbiter, and that the current one's like a machine made from anima or whatever.
Yeah. I
Uh,
mean, I like, and everything about that plot twist, I like quite a lot. I think it's cool that we just straight up lose. That
yeah,
Zoval wins. He gets he gets the shit and he eats. I think that's sweet, right?
yeah.
Um, but I don't know. I just feel like that revelation is weird or whatever.
No, I agree. As I messaged you, I didn't realize it was like it was what did I say? What was it? Closure week.
Take your child to death day.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Closure week on Azeroth. Right? It's like, Mom, I feel bad about Garrosh. She's like, Son, it's all okay, right? Like,
I mean, earnestly, I loved that. I think that stuff is great. It's so cool, right? Jaina and Uther sitting there and talking about Arthas. That's the shit that I'm there for. Also, and you might not have noticed this. I don't know if you play with the sound on. When you activate those conversations, they play special music for the conversation, which is like, mwah, it's my shit, right? Um, but
so honestly, I didn't think it was too bad. And honestly, I think that you probably should have spaced these out over a couple of weeks. It should have done like one a week. It just like hit me that like first I see, Thrall talk to his mom, and then I see like the Mograines talk to each other too. It's like, oh, okay, right? Like it's like
yeah.
it just like it's just like a little too close together, right? It's like,
Yeah,
yeah,
I
like,
mean, there's a bunch of these. Tyrande talks to Chandris. Kael'thas talks to the Accuser. Some of these, something I don't like about this is that they don't all happen right there in Korthia. Um, like Kael'thas talks about how pissed he is that he doesn't get to be that he wasn't there to finally kill Kel'Thuzad, right? And the Accuser is like, well, why? Like what does you personally being there have to do with it? Um, Okay, I want to talk about Tyrande and Chandras, and Kel'Thas essentially, yeah, Twitter delves. Oh, save me from the Twitter delves. I was farming downvotes the other day because I said that Tyrande has a really complex character arc, and people got really mad at me. But I actually, what I specifically said was, I said Tyrande has a very good character or a very complex character arc, and I will go to bat for it. And I got a million people yelling at me that I'm very wrong because obviously Tyrande should have, I don't know, thrown Sylvanas into a blender or something. I don't know what they wanted, right? And I just kept getting like -10, -12, like every post of mine got downvoted to oblivion. But I was like, listen, I said I'm gonna go to bat for this shit. I'm gonna go to bat for this shit.
This is where you farm upvotes by going to WoW Circle Jerk and being like, Tyranda's like, Tyranda's the worstest forever.
Unironically, so one of the things that I think is really interesting, do you know the unjerk thread? Have you ever heard of the WoW Circle Jerk unjerk thread?
No, no.
Okay, as of this moment, the WoW Circle Jerk unjerk thread has has 1,500 comments, and it's just full of people saying the game is not that bad, you guys. Chill the fuck out, please. And every week, and the thing is that I love the unjerk thread because it is the perfect place to go when people are just like complaining about like dumb bullshit. It's just like shut the fuck up, please. Like I swear to God, right? People complaining about people complaining about the WoW store and then doing just the insane mental gymnastics to say that the Final Fantasy 14 store is better. It is insane. The 5D chess that goes into that or whatever. But every week that unjerk thread goes more and more and more. Like at first it was like, are we gonna break 1K? And then we break 1K, and then are we gonna break 1,200? And then now it's 1,500. So everybody's memeing about when it's gonna finally break 2K. We're gonna get 2K in the weekly unjerk thread.
Man, no, I will say though that the fucking like I thought the Mal'Ganis like you touch a book and Mal'Ganis is like haha, you thought you got rid of me but not really, and we'll resolve this next week on on WoW Adventures. Right? Like that felt
Yeah.
that felt a little cheap. Yeah.
Yeah, that was I honestly feel pretty cheap. I like actually the Mal'Ganis stuff. I think I like the Dreadlord stuff. No, I think I probably like the Draka Thrall stuff the best out of all of like the 9.1 questing. But the Dreadlord stuff was insanely good. I think that the Dreadlord stuff that they did in 9.1 is actually it's the best version of the Dreadlords that we get like in game. Like this is like the first time where first there's the conspiracy, then there's the like you have to uncover and figure out who's what, and you're decrypting the code or whatever, and I felt really bad about this when they give you the notes. They all have a cipher, and I was like, oh, this is so cool. I'm gonna figure out the cipher and go post it on like the WoW lore subreddit, get a million upvotes or something. And I spent all this time decrypting the cipher, and I was like, okay, I'll do. I decrypted the thing, and I did a couple of the messages so I could see like Death Rock, don't fail me again, or whatever else. Right, there were a couple other messages like that, and I was like, okay, I'll do the rest of these after it's over. And I went back to the questing, and the very next quest, they give you all of the messages decoded, and I was like, God fucking damn it! I was so excited to be the guy to like decode the things or whatever. But yeah, I just really enjoyed like the actual decoding the conspiracy of the Dreadlords as it was happening, kind of stuff. That was great.
Lou says the book was the teaser after the credits in a bad serial. I totally
Yeah,
agree with that. Yeah.
absolutely agree with that. Yeah.
No,
He escapes off screen. I think one of my other favorite moments is when you go and you see Mal'Ganis in his cage, and he's like, "I'll give you power if you get me these rune stones." And then you go and you get the rune stones and you give it to his jailer, like, "These were just lying out there. Please do something better with this so he doesn't escape." That was pretty funny.
no, I agree. I agree. I'm actually super surprised they didn't do like a Jaina as a Dreadlord gag. Like I thought for sure that there was gonna be like a Jaina. It's like
Yeah.
it's like a one-off thing, right? Like the real Jaina is gonna run in from off screen. I guess they're leaving that as still a possibility,
Yeah,
right?
maybe that's coming in 9.2, right? And they did a Heroes of the Storm skin for it, right?
Oh, did they?
So yeah, they get there's a Dreadlord Jaina skin in Heroes of the Storm.
Yeah. Well, We're at about time. Did you want to do anything else before we got out of here?
Nope, I'm good.
All right. I do have one thing to promote though, which is uh, there's this Kickstarter for this baseball film called EFIS, which is about like the last game on like a hometown field for a rec league. It's they describe it as like the opposite of the Field of Dreams. The only reason I'm interested in it is because my brother has signed on to shoot it. So full disclosure there, but it looks like it could be amusing.
Very cool.
There's a Kickstarter for it. If you feel so inclined, I would encourage you to check it out. There will be a link in the description.
Congratulations to Grango. Greg
Yes,
Tango.
yes. Um, but yes, that's the last thing I have to promote. Did you want to promote anything before we went into the end?
I am doing Buddy Gets Good Grime this Friday. I'm also theoretically running a very casual sort of speed run event on Friday as well. So if you're thinking anything grime related, please feel free, to come hang out in the Grime Discord on Friday. But otherwise, I have nothing else I'm looking to promote.
All right. Well, with that, I'm going to say, if you want to email us about anything you talked about on today's podcast, if you'd like to, you can email us at subversiveplaygames@gmail.com or podcast@subversiveplaygames.com. You can follow us on twitch.tv/subversiveplaygames, where these go out live now. We've got a YouTube channel. We've got a SoundCloud. Rate and review us everywhere. Subscribe. Do all the good things. All the socials are in the description. We've got a Patreon if you're feeling particularly generous. I think that's everything I have, and we already did that part. So until next time, dear listeners.
Until next time, loyal listeners.